They offer you poison in a golden cup. It is called an argument. You are told that to refuse it is a sign of weakness, an admission of defeat. You feel the familiar surge of heat in your blood, the primal tightening in your chest. They have handed you a rusted sword and pointed to a muddy, blood-soaked battlefield of their own design. The world, in its noisy and foolish wisdom, screams for you to fight, to defend your fragile honor, to prove them wrong. But what if the greatest victory is found not in lifting the sword, but in letting it fall, silent and heavy, into the dust? What if the most devastating response, the one that shatters their reality, is the one that is never spoken? To achieve a state where you win every argument is to first learn the sublime and secret art of never engaging in one. This is the first gate on the path to true power. The average person is a prisoner of immediacy, a leaf caught in the torrent of their own reactions. They live their lives within a cage of stimulus and response, believing their predictable emotional spasms are signs of authentic passion. When confronted when their cherished ideas are questioned or their delicate ego is pricked, the ensuing reaction is as mechanical as a clockwork soldier marching towards a cliff. They lean forward, their voice sharpens with indignation, and they willingly step into the arena. They believe with a tragic sincerity that they are crusaders for truth, champions of reason, defenders of their own integrity. In reality, they are merely unpaid actors in a crude drama scripted and directed by their opponent. An argument is a theater of futility, a chaotic spectacle of mutual incomprehension. It is a desperate and undignified scramble for the final word, a clumsy exchange of psychological blows where both combatants retreat, bruised, resentful, and more violently certain of their own righteousness than before. Let us dissect the anatomy of this ubiquitous self-defeat. The opponent often unconsciously establishes a frame, a narrow, distorted prism through which a fragment of reality is viewed. By accepting their invitation to argue, you are implicitly accepting this frame. You consent to their terms of engagement. You legitimize their position by deeming it worthy of your energy, your time, your focus. In that first moment of engagement, the seed of your defeat has already been sown. With every defensive word you utter, you surrender invaluable territory. You broadcast a detailed map of your own mind, your emotional triggers, your intellectual insecurities, your deepest passions. You expose the very blueprint of your psychological fortress for them to study at their leisure. Your burning, desperate need to be seen as correct becomes a glaring vulnerability, a gaping hole in your armor that they can exploit not just in this fleeting encounter, but in all future conflicts. The conventional path is to meet fire with a greater fire, but this strategy only ever creates a more monstrous inferno, one that consumes your precious reserves of peace, clarity, and strategic capital. You may exit the conflict having shouted the loudest or having presented a mountain of meticulously gathered facts, but the strategist recognizes this for what it is, a fool's triumph. It is a Pyrrhic victory that costs more than it is worth. You may have won a meaningless skirmish, but in doing so you have gravely compromised your position in the only war that truly matters, the long war of influence and control. You have revealed your hand, exhausted your spirit, and most damningly, allowed another human being to dictate the weather of your internal world. This is the very definition of strategic impotence. It is the path of the pawn, moved across the board by a will that is not its own, sacrificed for a cause it does not even comprehend. The great general Sun Tzu, in his timeless and immortal treatise, The Art of War, illuminates a different path. It is not a path of confrontation, but of transcendence, a path of profound, serene, and devastating power. The master strategist's foundational principle is this: the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. This single elegant axiom must become the lens through which you view all human conflict. You must fundamentally reframe the entire concept of a verbal dispute. An argument is not a test of your encyclopedic knowledge or your moral righteousness. It is, first and always, a test of your self-control. The strategist sees the baited argument for what it truly is, a crude and obvious trap, laid out to ensnare the emotional, the undisciplined, and the egotistical. And so the strategist performs the one maneuver the opponent can neither predict nor counter. They do nothing. This, however, is not the vacant, passive nothingness of the coward or the fool. It is the deep, observant, and calculated stillness of a predator waiting in the reeds. It is a silence that carries more weight and authority than 1,000 shouted arguments. It is a deliberate refusal to engage that functions as a more powerful and definitive rebuttal than any counterstatement. While the common man frantically rushes to defend the walls of his castle, the strategist understands that the castle is merely an idea. He allows the enemy to lay siege to a phantom, to exhaust their armies and their morale against an unbreakable illusion of indifference. By refusing to argue, you deny them a target. You become, in Sun Tzu's own words, formless. The ultimate in disposing one's troops, he writes, is to be without ascertainable shape. Then the most penetrating spies cannot pry in, nor can the wise lay plans against you. When you offer no argument, you present no shape. You give them no front to attack, no position to flank. The opponent's carefully crafted insults, their logical fallacies, and their emotional provocations pass through you like stones hurled into a fog. Their energy, their anger, their desperate need for conflict, all of it finds no purchase. They are left to grapple only with themselves, their own frustration compounding with every passing second of your unshakable, unnerving calm. This is the genesis of true psychological dominance. The objective is not to silence your opponent. The objective is to render them and their entire reality utterly irrelevant. You conserve your energy. You maintain pristine mental clarity, and from your elevated vantage point of detached observation, you watch as they dismantle themselves. In their desperate attempts to solicit a reaction, they expose their tactics, their hidden motives, and the precise depths of their desperation. They are the raging hurricane, and you are the serene, unyielding mountain. The storm expends its fury, but the mountain remains unmoved and eternal, long after the chaos has passed. The path of the master strategist is the path of understanding that the most important battlefield is rarely the one that is presented to you. True unassailable power is the sovereign ability to choose your terrain, to dictate your own terms of engagement, and most critically to decide if a battle is to be fought at all. By refusing the argument, you seize this ultimate power instantly and without effort. You are no longer a mere participant in their petty game. You become the silent architect of your own superior reality, a reality in which their chaotic, reactive energy simply cannot exist or find oxygen. The victory is not found in the argument's eventual conclusion, but in its very prevention. This is the art of the invisible war, a war fought and won in the silent chambers of the mind before a single hostile word is ever allowed to poison the air. To engage is to willingly step into a cage of their making, for an argument is a prison of two, and the moment you speak in your own defense, you lock the door from the inside. The greatest power is not found in winning the foolish battles they invite you to. It is found in making the battlefield itself vanish into thin air. For an argument is a baited invitation to fight on another's territory, on their terms. The true master never accepts such a vulgar summons. Comment, I dictate the terms to claim this power as your own, and subscribe to learn how to dissolve all conflict before it can ever truly begin. To refuse the argument is not an end, but a beginning. It is the closing of a door to a noisy marketplace of fools in order to enter the silent temple of the strategist. Here, within this sanctuary of quiet observation, the true principles of invisible warfare are mastered. These are not tactics of aggression, but doctrines of evaporation, misdirection, and psychological gravity. The first and most fundamental of these principles is that of formlessness. Sun Tzu observed, "Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing." The provocateur comes to you expecting a wall, a solid structure of ego and belief against which they can smash their fists. They have prepared for resistance. They have rehearsed their attacks against a predictable, solid form. When you refuse to argue, you deny them this form. You refuse to be the wall. Instead, you become like water. You offer no surface to strike, no position to assail, no definable shape to target. Their initial thrust, meant to wound or provoke, passes through nothingness. Imagine a swordsman swinging with all his might at a column of smoke. The act is not only futile, it is ridiculous. The swordsman, not the smoke, is made to look foolish. His own momentum, unmet by any resistance, throws him off balance. This is the immediate psychological effect of your formlessness. The adversary is left staggering in a vacuum of their own making. Their energy, which they intended to project onto you, has nowhere to go. It recoils back upon them, turning their inner world into a cauldron of confusion and escalating frustration. They came for a fight, for the familiar rhythm of attack and defense, but you have offered them an unnerving silence. Their mind, unable to process this lack of conflict, will scramble to create a narrative. Are they weak? Are they mocking me? Do they not understand? Every question they ask themselves is a victory for you. Every moment they spend grappling with your ambiguity is a moment they are not focused, not in control. Your silence does not just protect you, it actively destabilizes them. You become an enigma, and the human mind abhors a vacuum. They will try to fill your formless void with their own fears, their own insecurities, their own assumptions. And in doing so, they will hand you the keys to their psyche without you having to ask for a single one. This is the passive, potent elegance of being like water. You do not need to attack the rock to destroy it. You simply flow around it, over it, and through its every weakness, until the rock itself is worn away into sand by its own obstinate solidity. The second principle, which gives formlessness its strategic purpose, is the art of deception. Sun Tzu's most famous axiom, "All warfare is based on deception," is often misunderstood as a simple call for lies and trickery. Its deeper meaning is far more profound. It is about the deliberate management of perception. Your refusal to engage in an argument is the highest form of this art, for it is a deceptive act disguised as inaction. The adversary perceives your silence as passivity, your calm as disinterest, your stillness as weakness. You must not only allow these misperceptions, you must cultivate them. Let them believe you are out of your depth. Let them think they have intimidated you. Let them bask in a false sense of intellectual or moral superiority. For a strategist, an underestimated position is the ultimate position of power. While they are blinded by their own arrogance, you are engaged in the most critical activity of any conflict, reconnaissance. Your silence is not empty, it is alive with observation. While they perform their monologue of aggression, you are studying them as a naturalist studies a creature in the wild. You are noting the subtle tells, the flicker of insecurity in their eyes when they touch upon a certain topic, the slight tremor in their voice that betrays a lack of true conviction, the repetitive phrases they use as a crutch for a weak position. You are listening not to the words they are saying, but to the emotions and intentions they are desperately trying to hide behind those words. Your serene inaction is a mirror. It reflects their own agitation back at them, amplified. They see their frantic gesticulations, hear the rising shrillness of their own voice, and feel the sour taste of their own impotence in the face of your composure. You are deceiving them into defeating themselves. You are creating the conditions for them to overextend, to become reckless, to say more than they should. They believe they are laying siege to your fortress, when in fact you have left the gates wide open and are luring them deep into a territory where their own ego is the only trap. This is the essence of strategic deception, to appear to be doing nothing, while in fact achieving everything. You win not by presenting a better argument, but by creating a reality where their argument self-destructs. You are not a participant in the battle. You are the silent observer on the hill, watching the enemy army march confidently into a swamp of its own choosing. These principles of formlessness and deception are deployed upon the third and most decisive element, the terrain. For Sun Tzu, the physical landscape was critical to victory. For the modern strategist, the terrain is psychological and social. The common person foolishly allows the adversary to choose the terrain. The moment you answer their accusation, you have agreed to fight in the muddy, chaotic trenches of their choosing, a battle of he said, she said, of facts against feelings, of ego against ego. This is a battle you can never truly win, for the terrain itself is designed to exhaust all who enter it. To refuse the argument is to refuse the terrain. It is a radical act of strategic relocation. You instantly transport the conflict from that lowly, undignified battlefield to a higher ground, the terrain of composure, status, and unshakable control. On this new terrain, the weapons of the common provocateur are rendered useless. Their anger, their insults, their logical traps, their emotional appeals, these are weapons designed for trench warfare. On the high ground of sovereign calm, they are like trying to swing a sword at the moon. By refusing to descend to their level, you force them to look up. This act changes the entire dynamic of the confrontation, especially if there are onlookers. The audience, whether it is one person or 1,000, will not see two people arguing. They will see one person becoming increasingly unhinged and another who is the very embodiment of grace under pressure. They witness one individual losing control and another who so completely possesses it that they do not even need to speak. You have seized the moral and psychological high ground without uttering a single syllable. From this elevated position, you control the narrative. You are no longer the defendant in their pathetic trial. You are the judge, observing their undignified outburst from a position of serene authority. The terrain you have chosen, the terrain of silence, is unassailable. There are no flanks to attack, no walls to breach. There is only a vast open space of calm that absorbs their aggression and makes them seem small and frantic in comparison. By mastering the terrain, you ensure that the outcome of the conflict is decided long before any decisive move is made. You have created an environment where your victory is not an event, but a constant established fact. The principles of formlessness and deception are the external weapons of the silent warrior, but their effective use is entirely dependent upon the mastery of an antecedent and far more crucial domain, the internal battlefield. Before you can hope to control the perceptions of others, you must first achieve absolute sovereignty over the riotous kingdom of your own mind. The first and greatest victory, the one from which all other victories are born, is the conquest of self. Sun Tzu knew that an army led by a general in the grip of his own rage or pride is an army already defeated. The strategist understands that emotions are merely signals, not commanders. Anger, pride, impatience, fear. These are the treacherous advisors whispering in the sovereign's ear, each advocating for a disastrous course of action. The common person mistakes these whispers for their own voice. They identify with the surge of adrenaline, the heat of indignation, and they act accordingly, becoming a puppet to their own primitive neurology. The strategist, however, has cultivated a space of profound silence between the stimulus and the response. Within this sacred gap there is observation without judgment. When anger arises, the strategist does not suppress it, for suppression is merely a delayed explosion. Instead, they observe it as one might observe a storm cloud gathering on a distant horizon. They acknowledge its presence, its color, its texture, its electrical charge, but they do not identify with it. They do not become the storm. This is the essence of internal warfare, the radical act of disassociating your core identity from the transient weather patterns of your emotional landscape. The opponent's insult is the stimulus. The resulting feeling of anger is the signal. The undisciplined person collapses these two events into one, reacting as if the insult and the anger are the same indivisible reality. The strategist separates them. They see the insult for what it is, a clumsy tool used by another, and they see the anger for what it is, an internal biochemical reaction. By refusing to fuse the two, they retain their power of choice. The need to win an argument is almost always rooted in the ego's desperate need for validation. It is a cry from an insecure self that feels its existence is threatened by a dissenting opinion. This is the most debilitating of all internal weaknesses. The master strategist has waged a long and patient war against this need. They have learned, through rigorous self-discipline, that their worth is not determined in the court of another's opinion. Their ideas are possessions, not extensions of their soul. Therefore, when an idea is attacked, they feel no personal wound. They can discard a flawed idea as easily as a general abandons a weak position on the battlefield, without emotion, without regret, only with a cold, clear focus on the ultimate objective. This inner peace, this unshakable core of tranquility, is the source of all your power. It is the firm ground from which you can practice formlessness and deception without risk. Your opponent, drowning in the chaotic sea of their own emotions, cannot possibly comprehend the nature of a person who is not ruled by them. Your calm is not just a tactic, it is a weapon. It is a psychological force that radiates outward, unsettling your adversary, and creating a palpable aura of authority that no amount of shouting could ever achieve. From this bedrock of internal dominion, you can begin the subtle and potent work of shaping the perceptions of others. The goal here is not to be liked or even to be feared in the conventional sense. The goal is to be profoundly misunderstood in a way that serves your strategic purpose. It is about becoming illegible, an enigma whose motives and next moves cannot be predicted. Sun Tzu taught the principle of appearing weak when you are strong and strong when you are weak. In the context of avoiding an argument, this takes on a new layer of sophistication. When an opponent comes at you with aggression, expecting a fight, your serene refusal to engage can be perceived as weakness or cowardice. You must allow this interpretation to flourish. You can even subtly encourage it. A slight, almost imperceptible shrug, a calm, patient gaze that seems to border on confusion, a soft-spoken deflection. These are the tools you use to build a mask of harmlessness. This performance of passivity is a strategic masterpiece. It disarms the aggressor completely. It lowers their guard, inflates their ego, and makes them feel secure in their own superiority. An overconfident enemy is a careless enemy. They will become louder, more boastful, and in their eagerness to display their dominance over your perceived weakness, they will reveal their entire strategy, their deepest insecurities, and the very arguments they hold most dear. You are giving them the rope with which they will hang their own position. Conversely, there are times to project immense, immovable strength through your silence. This is reserved for moments when a challenge is not merely a debate, but a fundamental threat to your position or authority. In these moments, your silence is not soft or passive. It is a wall of granite. It is a cold, unwavering stare. It is a stillness so absolute that it creates a vacuum in the room, forcing everyone else to become conscious of their own nervous energy. You do not raise your voice. You do not defend yourself. You simply are. This projection of unshakable strength makes the argument itself seem trivial and foolish. The challenger is not just arguing against a point. They are arguing against a mountain, and they will almost always back down. Not because they are convinced, but because they are intimidated by a quality of character they cannot comprehend. The strategist is a master of this dynamic calibration, a sculptor of perception who uses the same tool, the refusal to argue, to create entirely different effects. The ultimate aim is to ensure that others perceive you not as you are, but as you need them to see you in that specific moment to achieve your long-term objective. You are not a fixed entity, but a fluid, adaptable force whose true nature remains a closely guarded secret. Every one of these controlled interactions, every argument masterfully avoided, every provocation met with serene composure becomes a thread woven into the grand tapestry of your reputation. Your reputation is not built on a single dramatic victory. It is constructed slowly, patiently, and deliberately from the accumulation of these small, disciplined moments of inaction. It becomes a silent, invisible force that precedes you, an aura that enters a room before you do, and begins shaping the interaction before you have spoken a single word. This reputation becomes your shadow. At first, it is faint and barely noticeable. But over time, with consistent practice, it grows longer, darker, and more substantial. People begin to learn. They observe that attempts to bait you into emotional conflict are utterly futile. They see that you operate on a different set of principles, that you cannot be drawn into the petty squabbles that occupy the time and energy of ordinary people. Your shadow starts to do the heavy lifting for you. Potential adversaries, hearing of your legendary composure, will hesitate to challenge you not because they fear an outburst, but because they fear the unknown. They fear the quiet confidence of a person who does not need to raise their voice to command respect. Your reputation becomes a powerful deterrent, a form of preemptive victory that neutralizes conflicts before they ever have a chance to materialize. This is the ultimate expression of Sun Tzu's philosophy: to subdue the enemy without fighting. Your character, forged in the fires of internal discipline and demonstrated through consistent, strategic inaction, becomes your greatest weapon and your most impenetrable shield. It creates a peace that is not born of compromise or surrender, but of an undeniable and mystifying strength. It is the throne that no one dares to approach with a challenge, for the reputation of the sovereign who sits upon it suggests that any such attempt would not just be defeated, but would be utterly irrelevant. You have learned to master the storms within your own mind. You have learned to become formless, to wield deception as a shield, and to build a reputation that silences conflict before it begins. Now, before the final veil is lifted to reveal how this silent power is decisively consolidated, ensure you are subscribed and your notifications are enabled, for the ultimate knowledge of victory is reserved only for those dedicated to the complete path. The final stage of this invisible war is not a prolonged campaign, but a single, exquisitely timed action. It is the moment the strategist, after a long period of patient observation, finally chooses to act. This is not a counter-argument. A counter-argument is an admission that the initial argument had merit. This is something else entirely. It is a decisive stroke, a moment of profound and surgical precision. Sun Tzu describes this as the pounce of a falcon, which enables it to strike and destroy its victim. Note the imagery. The falcon does not engage in a prolonged dogfight. It waits, it circles, it observes from an untouchable height, and when the moment of maximum vulnerability presents itself, it strikes with an inescapable, devastating finality. The energy for this strike has been provided entirely by your opponent. Their mounting frustration, their escalating anger, their desperate need for you to engage. This is the potential energy, the shi, that you have allowed them to build. Your role is simply to choose the moment, to release that energy in a direction of your choosing. This moment almost always arrives when they are at the peak of their emotional expenditure, when their composure has completely eroded, leaving their core motivations exposed and undefended. The nature of the stroke itself is varied, but it is always minimal, calm, and executed with an air of complete detachment. One of the most effective forms is the disarming question. After absorbing a long and passionate tirade, when the opponent is breathless and expecting either surrender or a counterattack, you offer them neither. Instead, from a place of genuine, unfeigned calm, you ask a simple question that reframes the entire interaction. A question like, having said all of that, what is the outcome you are truly hoping for? Or, do you feel that this aggression is serving you well? This is a masterful maneuver. It ignores the content of their entire argument, the facts, the accusations, the insults, and forces them to confront the underlying intent. An aggressor is rarely prepared for this. They are prepared to defend their points, not their motivations. The question is like a sudden change in gravity. It pulls the rug out from under their entire performance, leaving them exposed, often appearing foolish and childish. Another form of the decisive stroke is the strategic withdrawal. This is not a retreat born of weakness, but a dismissal born of strength. At the peak of their outburst, you simply hold up a hand, not aggressively, but with an air of finality, and say quietly, "I have heard you." Then you turn and walk away, or you pivot your attention to something else, signaling that the conversation in your reality has concluded. This act is psychologically devastating for the opponent. It communicates that they are not worthy of your continued time or energy. It is a non-verbal declaration that their entire performance was irrelevant. They are left alone on their stage, sword in hand, with no opponent and no audience, their anger turning to ash in their mouth. The battle doesn't end with a winner and a loser. It simply evaporates because one of the participants was revealed to have never been a participant at all, but merely an observer who has grown bored of the show. The aftermath of this decisive stroke is the most critical phase. The true victory is not in the act itself, but in the new reality that it crystallizes. The strategist does not celebrate. There is no triumphant smile, no "I told you so." To celebrate would be to admit that the outcome was ever in doubt. Instead, the strategist simply observes as the consequences of their deliberate inaction unfold. The opponent is left in a state of profound psychological dissonance. They were not defeated in battle, because no battle was fought. They cannot claim you were a coward, because your calm projected immense strength. They are left with no narrative to make sense of what happened, other than the unsettling conclusion that they were operating on a completely different and inferior level of strategy. This is how you consolidate your power. You do not win the argument, you transcend it. You establish a new, enduring peace, but it is a peace entirely on your terms. The primary objective is not merely to end a single confrontation, but to make future confrontations unthinkable. Your reputation, which was once a shadow, now becomes a monument. Those who witnessed the exchange and those who hear of it learn a vital lesson. To attempt to draw you into a conventional conflict is an act of self-defeating futility. You become known not as a great debater, but as someone for whom debate is an unnecessary and primitive tool. Future challenges are deterred not by the fear of what you will say, but by the profound and unsettling power of what you will not do. The memory of the aggressor, flailing against your serene and immovable silence, serves as a permanent warning to all others. This is the enduring peace the strategist seeks, not the absence of tension, but the establishment of a reality where your position is so fundamentally understood that overt challenges become irrelevant. Ultimately, we arrive at the final philosophical truth of this entire doctrine. The supreme power is not the ability to win every battle, but the ability to architect a reality where battles are no longer necessary. It is the power to shape the perceptions, assumptions, and intentions of others so thoroughly that your will is enacted without a single moment of overt conflict. The common person seeks a throne from which they can issue commands and vanquish their rivals. The strategist seeks to build a throne that is so revered, so imbued with an aura of mystique and unshakable authority, that no one would ever dare to approach it with a challenge. Its power is in its perceived inaccessibility. Your silence, your discipline, your refusal to be drawn into the chaotic fray of human emotion. These are the materials from which you build this throne. The greatest dominion is not exercised through loud commands, but through a quiet, pervasive influence. It is the power that does not need to be demonstrated, because it is felt in your very presence. It is the peace that comes not from a treaty, but from the universal recognition that to disturb your peace would be an act of profound foolishness. This is the final lesson of the master strategist. The most powerful statement is the one that is never made, and the greatest victory is the one that is achieved in total, absolute, and magnificent silence. The argument is a cage for two. By refusing to enter, you reveal that you were never a prisoner of this world's petty conflicts, but their silent, unseen master.